Do you want Instagrammers or TikTokers to post about your brand? Or do you actually want to engage creators who influence their audience to buy your product? If you're in the latter of those two, you've come to the right place. Welcome to Winfluence, the Influence Marketing Podcast. Hello again, friends. Thanks for tuning in to Winfluence, the Influence Marketing Podcast. The evolution of a content creator is something brands and agencies see but don't watch. Now, bear with me on this for a moment. It's like the difference in hearing something and actually listening with the intent of understanding. So we on the agency or brand side of things may run into a content creator we find on Instagram who's doing interesting things around the topic we're focused on for our brand or client. We reach out to them, maybe do a sponsored post or some other type of trial run content collaboration. We appreciate their work and their, let's say, 50,000 followers there. And then we move on to other clients, other campaigns, other creators. A year or two passes by and we think, hey, that one creator might be a good candidate for this campaign. So we reach out to them and chat about the possibility, then have to swallow hard when their rates have grown exponentially because they have changed. Now they have 1.5 million followers on TikTok, or their YouTube channel exploded, or they were hired to be the host of a TV segment for some brand. Now they have a talent manager and have turned their content into a business. We saw it, but didn't watch. If we had, maybe we would have kept that relationship going. Content creators who are doing so with intent are trying to become media properties. They want to hire teams of people to do all the busy work while they create the concepts and sit out in front of the camera. They build audiences to sell advertising or brand partnerships to or for so they can grow their empire. It's that leveling up that falls into the purview of Kevin Grosh. He's the founder and CEO of Made in Network. The company does a lot of things, but its core capabilities are focused on creating content and building media properties for content creators. They do the same thing for brands too. When I connected with Kevin recently, I had a ton of questions. When do content creators turn to outside help for doing what they already do? What tricks do you have to build those big media properties? Can you make me famous? Instead of just chatting about it online, I asked Kevin to come on the show and help us all understand more about that evolution of today's content creator, past influencer to media property and brand, how his company helps them and brands, and how we can all benefit from knowing how it's done. Kevin Grosh is coming up on Winfluence. As always, this episode of Winfluence is presented by Scipio.ai. We are helping brands transform their digital marketing with user-generated content, videos, and images at scale. Why? I'll tell you why. Shopify data shows user-generated content quadruples your ad click-through rates. UGC drives as much as 7 times more engagement on social media. UGC improves website conversions by 29% and email click-through rates by as much as 73%. UGC is also more trusted by consumers than even traditional influencer content. Scipio.ai can plug your brand into your own brand community to find users and find those who create great content and help you engage them to do it for your brand. Your digital marketing will perform better with UGC. You don't have to go looking for content to use for paid or owned campaigns, and Scipio.ai has a team to manage it all for you if you want. Come see us at Scipio.ai if you want me to personally show you the platform and how we can solve your digital marketing performance problems with high-performing user-generated content. Just go to jasonfalls.co/Scipio, fill out that form, and I'll personally set up time to chat with you. That's jasonfalls.co/Scipio. Seriously, folks, we can make your marketing perform better and take a handful of content problems off your hands as well. jasonfalls.co/Scipio. When should content creators hire people to create their content? And how big will that make them? Kevin Grosh of Made in Network is next on Winfluence. Kevin, I really have enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about you and Made in Network, but I want to make sure that the audience here on the show understands a little bit more about what you do. So, if I were to throw it out there from a high level, I would say that Made in Network is a production company, most likely for creators. But why don't you tell us the kind of backstory of how it started and what you guys do?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that there's definitely a really strong component of what we do that's tied to production, but I think the kind of the origin story kind of helps paint a slightly fuller picture. Um, so just to give you a little bit of the background and the audience of background, we started myself and my business partner Keith Johnson, our COO, started the company back in 2013, and really our initial desire was to be working with creators to develop programming that felt like it bridged the gap between digital content and the TV world, right? We knew that audiences were watching online video like it was television. We wanted to make stuff that could serve that consumer. And so in the early days, we started producing shows that we were excited about with creative people that we knew being here in Nashville, that we could just launch and see what happened with it. And we started working with a handful of creators that had already developed a show concept and had built a little bit of a following. And what we found was is that as they were growing, they were collecting this audience, but they had all of these demands on their time. They were doing everything from the production to the uploading and the optimization of content, the writing, the starring, and the programming. And we felt like the best way to propel the business forward were to kind of take the things off of their plate that just weren't the best use of their time, including production, but also including these other facets of actually operating their business. And so today, while production for creators is still a huge part of what we do, it's also inclusive of these other more operational tasks and responsibilities that we can kind of come alongside our partners to help support so that they can focus on the things that are really going to drive the business primarily from a creative perspective.
Awesome. Now, I do have a question about approaching the creators, maybe originally and maybe even today too, because when a content creator is a content creator, that's what they do. They create content, and then here comes this company that says, "Hey, we can create content for you." And
Hmm.
I'm imagining there's some hesitation sometimes as to them saying, "Why would I need you? This I've done this all by myself. I've built my own brand. What do I need you for?" Do you get any of that hesitation, or is it pretty simple when they sort of see that, "Oh, wow, they're going to free up my time"?
Yeah, well, we talk about ourselves as a studio for the creator economy, and I think that that certainly can have like deep production connotations, but it can also have kind of that supportive infrastructure to bring things to life to market. And so when we start talking to creators and different talent, they oftentimes will start having a reference point in their minds, like, is this a manager, a potential manager for me? Is this a network for me? What is it? Is it an agent? Like what? And we're not really any of those things exclusively. We That's why we've called ourselves this studio. And what the way that we frame it up is that um, you know there's a finite amount of the most valuable resource for a creator is their time and energy, right? And there's a finite amount of that. And if we can come in to not take over their world and to direct where things are going per se, but to come in and be an extension of themselves, then they're able to do so much more. And so oftentimes where it's less about their desire to actually have someone support them, to have someone else saying we can help you produce content. It's more about their ability to trust and let go of some of these responsibilities that they've had squarely on their shoulders from the beginning.
Gotcha. So, at what point in a creator's evolution, if there is one, is the right time for a creator to come to you? Because I would
Yeah.
imagine that you guys need to see some degree of traction before you're interested in diving in and collaborating. They, have to be at a certain level to be able to really even afford any sort of partnership or collaboration. So, at what point in the lifespan do you look at a creator and say that's a good creator for us, or should a creator say, okay, now is when I need a studio?
Yeah. So there's really three kind of pivot points that we're oftentimes evaluating partnerships. I think that the most optimal for both parties is usually when a creator has has seen some growth and some traction. They've oftentimes been doing it all themselves for a period of time. They've started to have this upward trajectory of growth, but they reach this point where they've maybe started to assemble a team. Maybe they do have a manager. Maybe they do have an attorney or an agent that's bringing them opportunities, and their business looks like it's poised to take that next leap based on the opportunities that are coming to them. But they've kind of they've met that wall at what they can actually do on their own. And so it's usually at that inflection point where they're either saying, I'm going to plateau at this point because I just can't handle any more workload, or I've got to figure out how to scale. And that's usually where we're able to kind of start a conversation in a really productive manner, either through them or their team, or us proactively reaching out. And ironically enough, one of the things that we looked at for a long time when we were scouting talent is we were seeing lots of creators not only experiencing but then posting about their creator burnout. Right? They were talking about how, like, they'd title a video of like, I'm needing to take a break, and they'd outline in those videos some of their very real struggles. And I can tell you, Jason, I've heard so many of those struggles over and over and over again, so much so that we've tried to build out infrastructure to solve those very problems. And so when we come in, we oftentimes would say, hey, we really love the potential. We love what you're doing. We love the potential that you as a talent still have. We think we can help remedy some of these problems that you're facing. And that's oftentimes the most optimal time to start working together.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
the other two that I'll mention just very quickly is there still are instances where it's very early on, where we see a talent that's just starting out, and it's just obvious to us that there's potential even before they take off, whether it's kind of a white space in the market for that type of content where they're just doing something very creatively special, or they're a talent that's coming in from success in other areas. Right? They've had success elsewhere that we think we can replicate over here. So there are those opportunities at that stage in the game. And there's also talent that oftentimes has risen to a height, but they've either plateaued or peaked and are kind of on a downward trajectory. And it's not necessarily based on the validity or worth of their content. It's just based on needing something freshened up or reoriented from a strategy perspective to kind of rejuvenate the channel. So those instances where we work with talent at that stage of the game.
Very nice. All right, I want to take an example for those out there who are familiar, and they may not be, but Maddie Matheson, I think, is one of your talent. You're one of your creators.
Yeah.
I don't have a hold on how he started, but I assume at some point either you guys recruited him or he came to you. How did his content evolve?
Yeah, so Maddie is a really amazing talent and an interesting story. But we first met Maddie, long after he had kind of risen to online prominence, but just never through his own platforms. Really, he had found a lot of success having shows on Munchies and through Vice and kind of Vice associated properties. He was just a talent that had kind of risen through that media company. And he had done a lot of traditional television programming with them. He had online series that had done really well, and kind of built a following around him from an online perspective, while also building up his reputation more broadly in the culinary space through his restaurants, through cookbooks, etc. And at a certain point, Maddie had kind of departed the work that he was doing with Vice, and was kind of setting out on his own. And our conversation started not really at that inflection point, but really, as I was describing, someone that had built up an audience and a following in another arena, and we were trying to move it over. So we had launched an initial series on his own YouTube channel that was doing well. And we started talking about how we could accelerate that growth, launching higher volumes of programming. And that's been years now since he launched that channel, and has just continued to take off with more series, with higher profile content. It's been a really, really fun journey.
That's very cool. Yeah, I've watched a few of his videos. It's very entertaining. I got a lot out of it too, informative as well.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of your action is kind of revolves around serialized content, and so to translate that to most people, YouTube shows or channels is generally what you're talking about there. But I wonder how you guys view Instagram, TikTok, some of the shorter form channels. Are they an add-on for promotions only? Are they a distraction? Are they a channel in and of themselves? How do you guys take on those channels?
Yeah, so in the early days of the company, YouTube was the end all be all. And any other platform was really just kind of a we've created the content, why not throw it up there, right? Whether that be Facebook or Instagram or
Mm-hmm.
Twitter even. Um but at for over time, what ended up happening is instead of that being a kind of secondary platform, it's become for certain creators, businesses in and of themselves and kind of primary locations. We still think of YouTube as kind of the core platform, primarily because of its monetization capabilities and just the way that audiences can still discover content there. There's just more stability, more predictability around how you can work strategically and creatively on the platform. However, other platforms have become really robust parts of many of our talents businesses, and it just really depends on what their content is and how we've actually built those platforms to best leverage it. And so while I would still say that YouTube is at its core, we've really seen, especially over the past couple of years, a increased priority of these other platforms as playing more key roles in an overall strategy, whether it's audience development, whether it's expansion of ways that we can work with brands as brand partners want more kind of cross-platform activations. We want to make sure that those are healthy communities that are being built across those platforms.
Very nice. So you are producing a lot of the content for your talent, managing them too. I wonder, just philosophically, is your approach because you are more of a, kind of the genesis of it was a production company or a studio? Is your approach more about finding advertising for their channels, or are you brokering sponsored content like deals, or both?
Both. I mean, I think the way that we think about it is if you can develop a really strong core media business, meaning you've got sellable assets, you've got a strong recognizable brand, you've got talent that you've got formats that include talent but are not just about the talent. There's an important balance there. That if you can build a really strong core of that a community is really active within, then it's about, okay, how do we commercialize that in a broader level. And everything that we do for our partners is about kind of furthering the creator's vision, but also pairing the strategy with how you can commercialize that, right? So in some instances that means working with advertisers just for integrations within existing programming. At other times it means building out custom programming with the talent and the brand partner. And others it means launching extensions, be it products or experiences, off of that kind of core media business.
Very nice. We are talking to Kevin Gross. He's co-founder and CEO, I believe, of the old Made in Network down there in Nashville, although they've got locations in LA and Chicago, New York, and all that good stuff too. We've been talking about the creator side of the business. When we come back on Winfluence, we're going to ask Kevin a little bit more about how they work with brands and how you brand folks can benefit from Made in Network as well. Don't go away. Back on Winfluence with Kevin Gross, we're talking a lot about serialized content. We're talking a lot about creators, and now we're going to talk a little bit about brands. But before we do, Kevin, if I'm not mistaken, you are a Belmont grad. Is that correct?
I am a Belmont grad, proud.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Well, at the day that we're recording, the only reason I bring that up for everybody out there listening is a week from the day we're recording this right now, I dropped my son off as a freshman at Belmont University in Nashville, so he'll be down there. So I'll be calling you when he needs bail money. So.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm excited. I'm excited for him. It's a great spot. And you know, I wouldn't have changed my experience there for the world.
Well, we've been very impressed with everything we've seen from them. Obviously, that's where he wanted to go, and his mother and I have figured out how to make that work. So he's going to be enrolling as a Bruin here in a week. So we're happy and
Awesome.
proud of him. All right, back to what we're here to talk about. So the other side of Made in Network, we talked a lot about the Maddie Mathesons and the creator, side of the business and creating content with and for creators. But I want to talk about the other side of the business too, because a lot of our audience out there are at brands or at agencies, and they're trying to figure out serialized content as well. How did that side of Made in Network evolve for you guys? Was that at present from the beginning, or was it a byproduct of what you were doing with creators?
Yeah, it was a byproduct. And where it kind of originated was we were then, and we still do a lot of work with brand partners to integrate them within our programming to work with the talent that we're partners with. And so that could look like a product being integrated into an episode, look like custom series, all sorts of creative ways that we can, apply a brand's objectives and their messaging and incorporate that and partner that with the talent and the programming that we work with. And we've done a lot of really, exciting campaigns, a lot of interesting partners. And yet we had in the kind of the relative early days, we did have a number of them that were like, "Hey, this is all awesome to get access to these creators' audiences, but like we want to build our own communities. Like we want what they've got. Like we keep having to come back to the well here. How do we actually build out our own communities?" And at the time, we really hadn't put much thought into it, but that question from our partners prompted this reflection back on like, okay, well, what would it take for a brand to be successful in this space, building out their own programming? And we developed, a methodology of how that would come to life and how that could be successful for them. But that was all based on the simple principle that we kind of had to replicate what the creators were doing on their own, right? Like you have to kind of follow that blueprint. And we had the infrastructure, we had the personnel and the expertise to do that with creators. We figured that we could just apply that to a brand's business. And there were certainly challenges that we had to and still have had to overcome. But we've really tried to focus on bridging these worlds of kind of the influencer marketing world and the traditional media marketers. How are they bridging that gap so we can give kind of the white glove service, the reviews, the kind of creative ideation process that's necessary to kind of satisfy the way that brands and agencies work traditionally, but also pair that with what's actually going to work online. How are you actually going to build a real organic community around some of this stuff?
Very nice. So, I'll give you a little bit of an example of something similar that I collaborated on in my previous role at Cornet, an advertising agency in Lexington, Kentucky. We were working with a spirits brand, and we had identified we were looking for some serialized content. We were trying to kind of concept something to take to the brand because we knew if they were in a sort of branded serialized content, we knew that would resonate with their audience really, really well. And so we identified actually someone from your neck of the woods down there, Derek Wolf at Over the Fire Cooking,
Hmm.
and we went to him and basically said, and this was when he was probably at that point in time about 100,000 followers on Instagram. He wasn't huge at the time, and he's a lot bigger now. And we like to think it's because of partially because of something that we did, but he has great content. Does literally grilling over the fire, outdoor cooking, and we went to him and said, "What if?" And he was doing these little 60-second time lapse over the fire videos. I don't know how he did it without his camera melting, but anyway, he did
Yeah.
those, and he was really great at it. And we kind of went to him and said, "Hey, we are working with this brand. We want to develop a serialized content series for them. We love your content. You're a great content creator. We think we could help you step up your production value, step up your game, etc." And get a little bit bigger to have a better reel and all that good stuff for your future if we collaborated and helped you produce a short 4 or 5 series episode that
Yep.
was kind of wrapped around this brand. And it was brand forward, but it wasn't all about the spirit. It was all about cooking and recipes and pairing things. And we brought in other influencers as guests on this little 5 show series. So the agency in that scenario came up with the concept, went to the creator, pitched them on it, got his buy-in, then went to the brand and said, hey, here's kind of the package. So I tell that story to kind of give people the framework of where that idea came from. I'm wondering, in your experience, do you take the ideas to brands, or do they bring them to you, or do they come from somewhere else?
It's a great question, and honestly, it's happened in a myriad of ways. I think most often though, when we start working with a brand partner, the first thing that we start with is not an idea that they want executed, but is an objective, right? They come to us with a goal in mind. We're trying to, either better serve our existing clientele, right? We want to create a better experience for them. We know they're on YouTube. We know they're watching online video. We want to create content that's going to enhance their experience with the brand. It might also be like we need to reach a younger audience. We need to reach a new consumer. How do we do that through programming? Because we know they're living in that world all the time. What's the best way to interact with them? And based on their priorities, based on the things that are very material for them, we then go back and we first present a strategy back to them, right? It starts before even the creative comes into play. We start making recommendations around content verticals that they should be, paying attention to, programming within that space that they should get a reference point to say, like, your target consumer is also watching all of these channels. So you got to have an understanding of like the type of thing that they're consuming on a regular basis, so you can figure out how you fit into that. And basically, once we align on that direction, we get inputted all of their brand priorities, their style guides to their, the profile that they've imagined of their target consumer, all of those facets. And then we go and say, we'll factor those things in, and we'll also factor in everything we described around what's actually probably going to work online. What are consumers watching and experiencing on their own? And then we develop concepts to come back to them, packaged oftentimes with talent and then a promotional plan as part of that. So we're not just making the stuff, we're also considering how are you going to get eyeballs to actually see it once you've made it.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Now, you mentioned talent there. I know you guys produce Wayfair's YouTube channel, I believe. Tell me a little bit about how that is constructed, because I think Carolyn Winkler is your host there. She's a YouTuber, interior designer. She's a personality. So she has her own channels and existed, before the Wayfair channel probably did. So
Mhm.
does the talent typically come for the branded entertainment? Does that come from your pool of creators and influencers, or are you trying to develop faces of the brands from elsewhere?
Yeah, so when we develop a program like that, based on the brand's priorities, oftentimes that doesn't align necessarily with the creators that we have within that we actually are producing content and working with on kind of the network side, on the studio side. But for us, we do have, I mean, we are obsessive about watching and consuming content and studying it. And so we do kind of pride ourselves in our ability to say, okay, if this is your priorities, here's some talent that we think align with your brand values, and then also this creative approach. And that's certainly a collaborative exercise with our brand partner. But when you find the right creator fit, like we've been able to do with Wayfair, you can make some really great stuff. And that's not just about them as a face for the brand, it's also a collaboration with them. So they're bringing their creative energy, and Carolyn's a perfect example of that, of being able to bring creative energy to a show that the creator probably wouldn't do on their own channel. It allows them to branch out of their typical formats and try something different.
Yeah, well, it's a great opportunity for the influencers and creators out there if they walk down that path, because when you have a company like Made in Network that's creating a branded entertainment product for a big brand that's going to put a budget and resources behind it, and you're a content creator who's, cranking out your stuff, but you have an opportunity to plug into a production that has a budget and has, an advertising budget and has reach and has a way to broaden your audience. It's a great thing to aspire to. So if you're an early onset creator out there aspiring to be a little bit bigger, keep that in mind, because those branded entertainment opportunities can come along. So last question for you here, Kevin. Very important. Hypothetical situation. What if you had an influencer marketing podcast host with a sexy beard who loved bourbon and Americana music. Can you make me a star, Kevin?
Hey, you got a right mix there of the bourbon and the Americana music. You're speaking my language. The way that we typically, imagine this as a real scenario of saying, let's talk about building you into a star. What's the potential there? We do look at of course, the creative, the charisma, the talent, but we're also looking at like what they're already doing and how we really feel like we can add value. You know your stuff, Jason. You do a good job, and I think that that is both an opportunity because we like to be working with people who we're going to be true collaborators with. In addition to there being content that we really believe in and that we think that we'd be excited to go and work with. I mean, selfishly, we work a lot in food and music and entertainment. Those are things that I just love personally. And that's how we initially even got into the food space, was just me being selfish. So I think that's a big portion of it.
That's cool. Well, I've got a little bit of bourbon content out there and a little bit of food content out there on the Instagrams, just because some local folks have come along and it's been fun. Most of my content obviously is very super niche with influencer marketing, but I got to work on the Americana music. If I can start doing that, adding that in there a little bit, build a little bit more credibility in that realm, I'll give you a call.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll
that sounds great. That sounds awesome.
Kevin, where can people find Made in Network and you on them there interwebs?
You can go to madeinnetwork.com and follow us on our socials and find more about what we're up to.
Very good. We're going to put all those links in the show notes. And when we come back here in a second, I will make sure you, the audience members, know how to get to them. Kevin, thank you so much for doing what you do and for making great opportunities out there for brands and creators and for sharing a little bit of that with us today.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I appreciate you having me on.
My big takeaway there is we just need to grow this show a lot so I can hire Kevin to do all the busy work so I can just be the eye candy. That's the ticket. Great stuff there from Kevin. Check him and the firm out in the show notes. I've also added links to the Maddie Matheson and Wayfair content, so you can see that as well. Just go to jasonfalls.co/Kevin Grosch. That's Kevin, Grosch. Or you can visit jasonfalls.com, click on articles in the upper right, look for the episode with Kevin's picture on it, or find the Kevin Grosch episode post on my Instagram at Jason Falls. In that one, you just jump into that post, comment with hashtag Grosch, Grosch. You comment that, and I will DM you the link you need thanks to my pals at Stampede Social. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with someone else who may as well. And if you're enjoying Winfluence overall, help us grow and tell someone about the show. You probably know someone who might want to know more about influence marketing. Send them to winfluencepod.com or share a link to this episode on your social network of choice. If you have a moment, drop Winfluence a rating or a review on your favorite podcast app. We are on them all. The show is now on video as well. Just look for Jason Falls Winfluence on YouTube to see the show as well as hear it. Winfluence is a production of Falls and Partners and presented by Scipio.ai. The technical production is by MPN Studios. Winfluence airs along MPN, the Marketing Podcast Network. Thanks for listening, folks. Let's talk again soon on Winfluence.